Hello and welcome to the Alive by Design podcast. I'm Marie-Nicole, for those of you who don't know me, and for those of you who do, welcome back. It's lovely to have you here again. Today's episode, I wanted to focus on the topic of beyond the algorithm, aligning content creation with natural rhythms, which was inspired by a contemplation around seeking consistency and the developing of a cadence in content creation and marketing activities for the sake of algorithms, which is advice we're given all the time by experts in the field of marketing for business and using social media to reach our ideal customer. Now, after engaging in and setting a 14-day challenge for webinar attendance, I started to think about how great that was, but also how challenging it would be to sustain if you don't have supportive practices and systems in place, which got me thinking about how natural systems and wild nature operates. Now, as a self-employed single mum living in a rural location, working from home, it has been so important for me to stay connected with the outside world via the use of digital tools and portals. And ironically, the moment I set this topic and planted the seed as something I would like to address, life threw me all sorts of obstacles to ensure I really understood the theory of what I was contemplating. This is my third attempt at recording this episode, and while I have created other content in the meantime, this particular episode has been delayed in the production. Even today, my schedule changed and I had to postpone recording it, and I'm doing so much later than I would normally do in a day. A flower is not always guaranteed to open at a set time of day or even week. It opens when the conditions are right for its blooming. A client I've been working with in the Digital Solutions program actually grows crocus flowers for saffron. And she didn't think that they would open up this season because the conditions just didn't seem right for it. And then eventually they opened up and they were able to harvest it. So it's just keeping that in mind, that not everything is guaranteed. The same can be said for women's 28-day cycles. They're not guaranteed. They fluctuate according to the health of their body, their mind, their environment, and even the interactions with others has an impact. So does this theory of creating content consistently, developing a cadence, actually serve the human behind the content creation? Now, after that 14-day challenge, I set myself a 30-day content creation challenge, not specifically for one platform, but to ensure that I was sharing content across several platforms consistently. But over the last week, I parked my 30-day content creation challenge to engage in a 17-day challenge I was invited to participate in, which was set by content creators based in the US. Louise and Fonzie from Biz Bros, and they have a podcast called Content is Profit. And they have collaborated with a lady by the name of Stacey, whom I've not met before this challenge, and I cannot remember her business name right now, so I'm really sorry, Stacey. But she is the one that's actually giving us the prompts for the challenge every day, and it's fantastic. And there's something really powerful about engaging in group energy, which is why I decided to do this one. And one of the topics that was set for us was, what is your ideal day? So I thought I would share with you my response to this, as I believe it's relevant to the topic of this episode. Now, my ideal day enables me to enjoy both having roots and wings, exploring beyond my nurturing nest, to explore and discover new things, and then return to the comfort and security of my nest. There are three elements to an ideal day for me, and one is connection to myself, connection to wild nature, and connection to others. Not on a surface level or in a superficial way, but in a way that engages all of my senses. Right now, I live for the most part what I would consider to be my ideal day, but there are aspects that could do with some tweaking, like access to wild nature and more in-person interactions. So that is what I'm working towards while making the most of the here and now in the meantime. And my content creation is a big part of that. It is a big part of creating those next steps towards my goals. Now, what about you? What would an ideal day be for you? And what does it mean in terms of creating content consistently? How does that fit into your ideal day scenario? I'd love for you to share that in the comments if you feel called to. Now, in my La Luna Living workbook, I ask participants to reflect on their non-negotiables, which sets boundaries around what to say yes to and what to say no to, in order to create a way of being that supports the desired life they wish to create for themselves, which is not dissimilar to stating what an ideal day would be for you. Me postponing the recording of this episode is because I kept my non-negotiables in mind when deciding what was priority. Now let's explore for a moment the elements to consider of what is recommended by the apps and how natural systems operate, such as algorithms. That is something that I hear a lot about in my coaching practice, especially in the Digital Solutions program, where the focus is how to use your online presence for your business. And algorithms do concern people because the recommendation is that it demands predictability and consistent posting schedules to optimize your visibility and engagement. In contrast to that, if we look to wild nature, we see that there are adaptive patterns and flexibility. The crocus flower that I said earlier as an example, it didn't necessarily open on a given day, time, or even week. And the same thing can be said for a duck that sits on a clutch of eggs. It will sit there and it will turn the eggs and it will ensure the conditions are right to hatch those little ducklings. It'll add more down and it won't leave the nest if the temperature is not right outside for it to get off the eggs and go and take a bath or get something to eat. It'll stay there until it feels like the temperature is right at that point where it can then leave and then return without losing too much of that heat. Now, that actually makes me think about us as content creators in terms of if we are pushing ourselves to do something by a certain time and be there at a certain time or day, and we're actually working against our own natural rhythms, then that actually affects our creativity and our well-being. Now, part of the reason why I didn't actually record this episode when I intended to initially was because one morning I got up to do yoga, and I do that sometimes before the sun even rises, and I do it by candlelight. And this particular day I was up in the dark by candlelight doing yoga because that supports my well-being, and I heard this pop and a big flash of light, and I thought it was actually lightning because it was raining that morning. And I looked outside and there was no lightning. So anyway, I went back to doing yoga and then I finished yoga and then again, pop, and a big flash of light. Now this happened 3 times and I realised that what that pop was actually the power line between our house and the power pole. It was sparking. And so that changed our morning completely. There was 3.5 hours without power while the power line company came out and replaced the line. These are the conditions that we sometimes cannot actually do anything about, right? The interesting part about that particular day was we weren't allowed to go near the fuse box or the power line. We had to stay 8 meters away from it. So even if I wanted to drive out to somewhere else to work for that morning, I couldn't actually drive down our driveway to get out of the front gate. So we just had to stay here and wait. Now, if we take inspiration from wild nature and look at how it operates in a cyclical manner, and it has a patterns of seasons and even the moon cycle, and there are times when there's time to retreat and there's time to output. Now, I actually think it's really important to create content consistently. I believe that wholeheartedly. I just don't believe doing it at the sacrifice of our own well-being. And so that's why I like to encourage people to put practices into place that are like seasonal or cyclical practices. Working with the moon cycle takes us through the energetics of when we should actually focus on new ideas and content creation, and then other parts of the cycle actually enable us to do the work that helps us put it out there and finalise the nitty-gritty details that need to be done to get it out there. Now, my youngest son, who is still living with me and works permanent part-time at our local hardware store in the nursery section, has had his work hours change in the last few weeks according to the season, because the plants in the nursery don't need to be watered first thing in the morning, but they do need to be tended to of an late afternoon to ensure that they're not frostbitten of a morning. Even his physical workplace changes his hours according to the season. So the digital space is actually no different. I believe that what we have done is we have fallen into a trap of just trying to keep up with the algorithm for the sake of getting the content out there. And then what's that doing? Let's look at the human element of this. It actually, if we stick to rigid schedules like that, we end up burning out and we reduce our creativity. So instead, if we actually foster the conditions that support our own thriving and our creativity being a part of that, then we create content that our audience can actually genuinely connect to, and it's more authentic to us. While creating consistently is important, creating content that resonates is even more powerful. So fostering that ability to do so is really important. And I'm not saying I have all the answers here. I'm not telling you that I'm an expert in how you should create your content. What I want to encourage you to do is think about what actually serves you best and your audience and your creativity, because that's a really important part. What you are actually sharing with the world is your creative expression. And if you lose that trying to be so rigid in your content creation, or you don't show up at all because you're avoiding losing your creativity, then that does not serve you or the audience in the end. Now, I was able to engage in that 14-day challenge despite all of the one that I had set for webinar participants, despite all of the changes and extra commitments that I had taken on based on preparing for our property to sell, because of the systems I put into place and the templates to work from that support me in creating that type of content efficiently. No matter what time of day or day of week, I am able to pump out that kind of content because I have those templates and systems in place. However, my video recording, editing and uploading has a lot more layers to that process. So I am now working on ways that I can create conditions and systems that support efficiency in that area of my content creation too. Now, there have been time periods when I have purely created content based from those templates just to get me through a really challenging period. But the most powerful content and the pieces that get the most engagement are the ones that I've created with intention to serve the audience, as well as represent my brand and my offerings. So consider this for yourself. Fostering more engagement and that loyal audience who appreciates the content that resonates with them on a deeper level is what you're really after, not necessarily just putting content out there for the sake of it. Sharing from your heart and a place of your cup being full, rather than a place of desperately trying to keep up with a schedule that has the potential of sparking connection, but instead actually fostering that connection. And remember flexibility. Flexibility is so important in your content strategy. Flexibility, not in terms of not showing up at all, but just the flexibility in the way that you create your content. And some advice I would give around that and how to actually incorporate your natural rhythms and strategies. I spoke to that earlier with using the moon cycle and the energetics of that, which is what I coach people through in my coaching service. But I want to suggest to you just some of the simple tools that you can use to help you actually be productive in a way that's supportive to your natural rhythm and system. Now, one of the ways I suggest doing this is to record your ideas and your thoughts that come through related to your content creation in a dedicated journal or notebook. Now, for those watching the video, I'm currently holding up my journal, which I have probably shared before, but I still think it's worthwhile sharing because it's relevant to this topic. I actually have 4 notebooks within the one cover for this, and I actually make these journals and I do sell them, so they are available on my website, these journal notebook covers. But it actually is so good to separate your notebooks out. I have one that's dedicated to my podcast and my YouTube channel, and another one that's dedicated to my business offerings and ideas, and then another one dedicated to my personal growth, and one to my thoughts, intentions, and inspirations. So when I write down ideas as they come through in a notebook that is always handy, I don't lose the idea, and it's easy to reference it because ideas often come through and later on you forget them. So that is a really practical piece of advice that I often give to clients, because in my coaching sessions, I've often seen people scramble for a piece of paper to write down notes during our sessions, and it's not necessarily a piece of paper connected to other thoughts around the topic. It's just whatever is available to them. And so I suggest a dedicated journal, notebook for each of your topic areas, not topic areas, for each of your areas of life and business that are important. Content creation being a part of that, and especially if you want to create it consistently. Also allocating time to engage in the platforms. Well, if you use Instagram, for example, and your audience is on Instagram at 6 o'clock is the peak time, but 6 o'clock doesn't align with you and your schedule because you're making dinner at that time, or you're attending to animals' needs, or you're even driving into town like I will be. At 6 o'clock, I'll be in town picking up my son and doing grocery shopping. That is not a time that I can sit and engage on the platform. So choosing another time slot, usually the second peak time slot. So it might be for your audience between 2 and 3 o'clock. And using that time, or even over lunchtime, and using that time to engage in the platform so that you are active, and even putting your posts up at that time and then responding to the comments that come through. Now, I actually find YouTube to be a really good platform for the content that I produce, and I have a global reach with that. So I'm not on YouTube at 3 o'clock in the morning when a lot of my followers are actually there engaging with my content, but I do make sure I allocate time to respond within a reasonable time frame, within a day or two at the most, but usually within a day, to engage with the comments that are made, because that is what we're trying to do. We're trying to actually foster community around our offerings, and content creation is a big part of that. So the other practical piece of advice I've got for you is to actually batch your content creation. So sitting down with your notebook, all of the ideas that have come through, and actually allocating different days that you're going to put out that piece of content, and then preparing ahead all of the supportive material that you need to be able to create that piece. So you're not on the day trying to scramble and put something together. And then batching in terms of the actual creation of the content, and then you can slowly post it out over the next week or two. But the other really, really important thing in terms of working with natural cycles and systems is to allow time for rest and rejuvenation. Because if you are constantly trying to think of, what do I need to do next? What do I need to get out? Your brain is just going to end up being frazzled, and even your body. It's so important to just step away, take that time to rest and rejuvenate, and that is when you'll often find your best ideas come through. So unplanned and unexpected disruptions, like when the power went out because of a line sparking, that's a great time to just say, great, use this to reconnect to self and just let ideas flow through and just be in the moment and allow yourself to rejuvenate and let go of the commitment that you had for that morning. But that it doesn't have to be that extreme. You can actually allocate time for that too. Now, one of the last questions that we had in the 17-day challenge that I'm engaged in is, if money were not an issue, what would I do? I reframed this question and I turned it into a journal prompt. After contemplating that and responding to it, I ended up creating a video for my artisanal living playlist. And so I think it'd be really good for you to watch that if you're interested in seeing what came through, because that was a really powerful thing to do, to reframe that question. The title of that video is The Art of Abundance, Valuing Time and Talent Over Currency. There'll be a link to that video at the end of this one for those who are watching on YouTube, and I'll also put it in the show notes so you can actually get on there and watch that. Now, that artisanal living channel is actually only video based. I don't do it for the podcast. But the time that I allowed myself to stop and contemplate and reframe this question of what if money was not an issue, not only fostered the conditions for this artisanal living video that I created, it also led to a series of ideas that I can create in terms of business offerings. So that's where allowing yourself that time to rest and rejuvenate can really open you up to more. Now, I've got some questions for you to consider when it comes to your content creation. And one of them is, what is your objective? If it is to drive people to your paid offerings, then showing up is going to be important, but showing up in a way that connects with your audience rather than just to get in front of them is going to be so much more powerful. So what is your objective? And what feels good to you? Do you actually enjoy being on the platform you're sharing your offerings through, or are you there because that's where you think you should be? An example of this for me is TikTok. I actually set up a TikTok account and I started to try and use it, but I just didn't enjoy being on the platform. And honestly, Instagram is a platform that I have always enjoyed and used as one of my main portals to drive traffic to my commercial space, and that in-person engagement that I ended up having with the people that followed me or discovered me on Instagram. But since closing that commercial space, I've had to really rework the way that I engage with Instagram and the way that I post on it. I've actually found YouTube to be the space that I enjoy being on more because it dives deeper into topics. Now, that's me as a consumer. And so I've started to actually use YouTube as a content creator more because I realize that that translates to my physical experience. I want to revisit that question so that I remind you to consider this. What feels good to you in terms of the platform you're creating on? And then I want you to consider, what in-person situations do you feel like support your thriving? Now, I just alluded to the fact that I've jumped across from Instagram to YouTube as being my preference of platform to hang out in. So let's think about this in terms of a physical place. If you think about the difference between being in a bar where you have lots of quick chats and with lots of people who stop by and say hi and how you're doing, and you're in the middle of trying to have an in-depth conversation with a friend that you went to the bar with, and you might actually enjoy that, the quick chat. So maybe you don't want to have the in-depth conversation at a bar with a friend, and it might be better to leave that for another time and enjoy the bar with all of its quick chats. But if you actually like to have an in-depth conversation with a friend, then you're probably better off to invite your friend around to your home and really dive into the depths of the conversation. So let's translate this to the apps. If for you, what serves you best and makes you feel your most authentic self is to have those quick chats and create content on an app that supports that, but if you much prefer to dive deeper, then consider trying a new app as your platform to focus your content creation on. So that's where I've gone from that shift of, I still use Instagram and I still gain some benefits from being on Instagram. But for me personally, I am finding that I draw more from my use of YouTube, and not only as a consumer, but as a content creator. So considering what it is that supports your thriving and allows you to actually creatively express yourself and fosters deeper connection with the people that you want to engage with more authentically, and focus your energy there. So if you would like support in working in a cyclical manner, creating a rhythm for your life and business that supports your thriving, tuning into learning to trust your intuition and determine where to focus your energy and where not to, then this is where I can help you in my embodiment coaching service. And I also offer this as a focus on going from consumer to creator, embodying who you wish to become as a content creator, through the development of self-awareness, self-empowerment, and embodiment of who you are here to be and how you are here to serve the collective. You'll find a link to this in the show notes if you'd like to reach out. And I also want to remind you that investing in yourself is what will serve you fostering the conditions that support your thriving personally and professionally. Developing habits and practices, systems and processes at a foundational level help you create your life by design. So I invite you to consider that when it comes to your content creation, that being rigid may not actually serve you or your audience. However, being structured in your approach to remaining consistent will enable you to continue to create without sacrificing your health and well-being in the process, and not sacrificing your non-negotiables. but establishing a rhythm that supports your unique energy system so you can continue to show up as your authentic self, connect with your ideal audience, and work within the elements of what an ideal day feels like for you. Not only living your life by design, but fostering your thriving, enabling your inner essence to be your outer expression and contribute your unique thread to the collective tapestry. Thank you so much for staying all the way to the end of this episode. I hope it provided you with the insights and inspiration that you need right now on your quest of fostering thriving. If you are looking for a coach to support and guide you through your own unique journey of creating a life by design, reach out for a connection call. You'll find a link in the show notes. Also, please do pass this on to someone you think could get value out of it. And I'd really appreciate if you left a review for this podcast or comment on YouTube. I'd love to hear any insights or inspirations it activated in you. And I look forward to soaring alongside of you too.